Okay, so let's go ahead and actually send some post requests from the front end. So we already took care of this in here where we have a project vote, and all we need to do is send in some body data. So we send in the value, the type of actual vote that we want to do, and we did all this from Postman. So when I send it, we see the response, and we also had to send a token with this. So now we want to do this from the front end. So when a user clicks on this right here, we want to trigger that response or that request. So we want to go to that route and then send it to the backend and modify it. And again, the replication here is of a user on a completely different server working with our API. And this could be our own project too, but we're just going to imagine that this is somebody on a different system. So we're trying to separate our two applications here. So to build this in, we're going to be using some more JavaScript here. So again, if you are not familiar with it, it could be a little bit harder to follow. But what we need to do here is we need to add in some event handlers to this. Now, the methods I'm going to use are probably not going to be the best ones. There's different ways of doing this, but I'm going to use the quickest way because the focus is not to give you best JavaScript practices, but to show you how to actually send these requests and work with our API. So if you have an issue with the methods, I'm sorry about that. I would recommend cleaning it up and then working with it yourself. The point here is to make these requests. So what I'm going to do here is once this data is output, so once we go into get projects, we load build projects, or we trigger that function. In build projects, once this data is rendered, so we have this for loop and we go through, we take this card here and we add that to that project wrapper. Once this loop is complete, so once this for loop is complete, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an event listener. So add an event listener like this. So we're going to go into each one of these cards here. We're going to grab these vote options here, and we're going to add an event. So when we click on up or down, we're going to need to get the value. So what kind of vote is this? And then we're going to trigger a post request. So we need to add an event listener. Again, there's better ways of doing this. This is where front-end frameworks are usually very nice because the styling is going to be a lot cleaner. But for this, let's go ahead and create a new function, and we're just going to call this function add vote events. So let's make this just beneath or just above our get projects and underneath our build projects function. So in here, we're just going to do let here. We'll use an arrow function. We'll just do add vote events. So this function is going to be in charge of adding event listeners to every single vote that we have here, or that vote icon or button or whatever. So we have our function here. This is going to be an arrow function. So I forgot the parentheses here. In here, the first thing I want to do is query all of these vote buttons right here. So let's go ahead and get those. So we'll just do let, and I'm going to do vote btns. So vote buttons here, and I'm going to camel case those because that's the formatting I like. So vote buttons, and this is going to be set to document.get elements. So we're getting elements now. So instead of element by ID, we're getting elements with an S there, and then by class name. So we're using a class here. So we need to get all of these. So in this case, this is going to give us like a query set or a collection of HTML elements. So I'm going to paste that in. So let's see, why is this white here? So the arrow function, oh, I didn't set that equal symbol here. So I want to show you what this looks like for those of you that are completely new. I'm going to try to involve as many people as I can. So we'll do console.log and we'll do vote buttons. So we'll set that. We're going to console this. Let's do vote btns. And I'm going to take this function here. And once we're done with this loop, so outside of the loop here, so for, and then let's find that closing one right here. Let's trigger this. So we're going to trigger this function, which is going to add those event listeners. So if I refresh this, so I just triggered that. Let's go ahead and go into inspect and let's go into console. Now we see vote buttons. So this is an HTML collection. So it gives us all the buttons. So if I click on this, it shows me the actual HTML element, all its attributes, and so on. So if I go out of that, it's simply a collection of elements. And at this point, we have 15 projects here, I believe. I think it's about 15. So we're adding a vote button. Each project will have 2 of those vote buttons, an up and down votes. That's what we're doing here. We just queried all of those projects. So let's go ahead and continue here. So what we need to do is we need to loop through all the vote buttons. So once they're output here, we're going to trigger this function. Then we're going to loop through all of these buttons and we're going to add an event listener. So we're just going to do for, and then let's just do let I, and then that's going to be set to 0. So that's going to be the index, and we'll do vote btn, so that's the collection.length, so we can access the length attribute or property. So while I is less than that, let's go ahead and auto increment I. Then let's continue with that loop. So in this loop, what do we want to do? So we'll just do vote btns, and then we need to access each individual element. So we're taking the index number, we're throwing that in here, and on each iteration, we are going to add an event listener. So we'll just do add event listener. So for those of you that aren't familiar with JavaScript, we add an event listener and we can do different types of events. So these are events in the front end. So that can be a hover event, it can be a click. So these are events that occur. So what a user is doing with their website in the browser. So we're adding an event listener, and we need to specify the type of event that we're working with. So in this case, the listener here is going to work with the click event. So inside of this event, we need to add in a function. So on click, we're going to create a function and we're going to pass in the actual event. This will be an arrow function. And let's go ahead and finish up the function. So on click, we are going to trigger this function right here. So I hope you can follow along here. Hope you understand that. So console.log, we'll just say vote was clicked. And then let's just console out the index of that. So let's just do I. So let's see if this is working. So if I go ahead and go back into the front end, if I go into inspect, when I click on these, we should see vote was clicked. That's the first index. If I go to this one, vote was clicked. That's the 7th one. So we're just responding to events. So now that we have the event listener, we actually want to do something here. So we want to send a request. So I'm going to remove that console. So now that you can see that, we added all the events because we added this function after that loop. Now in here, inside of vote buttons on click, what do we want to do here? So the first thing I want to actually do is I want to figure out what type of vote this is and what's the project that we're voting on. So I need to get the vote value and the project ID. So for this, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add in a custom attribute into each vote. So in the upvote, so this left one is the plus button, I can actually set custom attributes. So in this case, this can be done by data and then whatever we want to call this attribute. So this can be cookie or whatever we want it. It doesn't matter, it's our custom name. So we're going to set some custom attributes here. So in this case, this is going to be data dash vote. So that's the vote itself. And then we're going to specify the value, and this is going to be an upvote. Now I can do the same for the next one. So we're going to add the custom attribute. This is inside of that opening tag, and this is going to be the downvote. So this is how we're going to know what the user clicked. So what vote. Now we also want to get the vote or the project ID. So we want to know what project to add this vote to. So in this case, we're going to add in another custom attribute. This will be data dash project. And we could do project ID, but in this case, I'll just do project. And inside of here, we're just going to go ahead and add the variable, and we'll just do project.id because that's going to be the ID of every project on the iteration. So we'll copy that and we'll paste that also in here. So we have the vote type and the project ID. So now we want to get that in here. So we want to know where we're sending this data and what kind of data we're sending. So let's go ahead and create a variable, and we want to get the vote. So we actually want to get this on each event. So we're going to do E. So that's the event here. And we're just going to do E.target. So the actual item that we just clicked on. And then we need to go into data set. So we're going into all the custom attributes here. So data. And for this one, we want to get the vote. So we're going to do dataset.vote. Now I'm going to copy this again. And now we want the project ID. So we'll just do project and e.target.dataset project. So now let's console this out. So I want to make sure that we can see everything that's happening here. So we'll just do project, and then let's just go ahead and add in the colon here, console out the project, and then I also want to get the vote. So the vote itself, this will be vote. So on click, let's make sure we're getting all the values. So if I inspect this, let's refresh that, and we'll go into console. As I click on these, Yoga Vive, we see the project ID, and we know that that was an upvote. If I do downvote, we see the same project ID, and now we see a downvote. If I go to one of these, now we get a different project with the vote value. So we're doing everything that we need. So that's it for that section to identify the actual project that we're voting on and the type of vote. Now we want to send a fetch request. So in this case, we're going to use the fetch API again. So right here, we used fetch. By default, it's a GET request, so we didn't have to specify anything With a post request though, we're gonna have to do something a little bit different. So let's go ahead and use this. So we'll just do fetch. And we want to set the URL here. So I'm gonna do backticks here because we need to pass in some parameters. And if I open up Postman, this is what our URL looks like. So we have API, projects, the project ID, and then we do vote at the end. So let's go ahead and take all of this here. So let's actually add that in ourselves, never mind. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's take this opening URL. Let's copy that right here. So we just copied the port 8000. I'm gonna scroll slower here. We'll add that in here. And then we just need to do /API/projects. And we need to pass in the project ID. So we're gonna do the dollar symbol. We'll pass in a variable. So this has to be backticks in order for this to work. Make sure you don't mess that up. And we need to pass in the project ID. So we're building our URL. And then we need to end that with a /vote and make sure that closes with a / just to not get any issues. So we just built this URL. So we're gonna send the dynamic value on each click. Now, because this is a post request, we need to specify a few things here. So the first thing is we need to add in this, I guess, object or the two curly braces. In JavaScript, I guess that's an object here. And let's just do method. So we need to specify the method, and then in a string, we're saying that we're sending a post method. Now, with the post method, we need to specify the headers. So the first thing is we need to specify the content type. So the type that we're sending, and that's kind of like the equivalent of this right here. So when we go into body, we can do raw, and then we specify the content type. So is this text, JavaScript, JSON? What are we doing here? So in this case, we are specifying the content type. So we'll do content dash type. And then let's just do application JSON. So application /JSON. So we're saying that we're sending post data. The content type is going to be JSON data. So let's leave it at that. And I actually want to show you one error that occurs here, or we'll fix it in a second. So once we specify the method, actually we'll do this right now. So remember when we were sending the token, so in our headers, we were setting authorization and then the bear token here. So we want to do this here now. So I'm going to copy authorization. So in our post method, we set the content type, and we also need to set a token. So remember that we are going to get blocked if we don't have a token. It's going to tell us, hey, we don't know who you are. We're not going to allow you to vote. Now, inside of backticks here, let's just do bear. So we'll do bear like that. And we need to pass in the token. So in this case, let's go ahead and generate a new token. So I want to make sure that this is a fresh token. So we're going to API /users token. So fill in your user's information. That should generate a token for your user. Let's take this access token, and we're going to make this dynamic right now. I just want to show you how to do this manually. So we'll take this token and let's just add this in here. So let's add the token above here. So in our event listener, let's just do let token, and we'll set that string. So we just paste it in that token, and let's take this token and add that right here. So we need a space, and then we'll go ahead and add in that variable. So we're going to this URL and we're setting authorization. Make sure that's not in a string. I think it might still work if it's in a string, but we'll leave it like this. And we're passing in the token here. So to actually get the response here, I want to see if everything worked correctly. So in this case, let's go ahead and add in the promise here. So fetch ends right here. So we'll just do this after this. So we'll just do .send. Whoops, I accidentally messed up the indentation. So we'll do .then. Then we're going to take that data, we're going to turn it into JSON data. So we're just going to take that response. So we'll do response, convert that into response.json. So we turn that response into JSON data, and then we want to do .then. And let's go ahead and get the data, and we'll trigger, or we'll call the arrow function here, and let's just do console.log. And let's just do success. So we'll just do success, and I want to print out or console the data. Okay, so remember that in our response here, if we go back into our Django project, and by the way, make sure your server is still on. In our API, when we vote here, so project vote, we return back the project that we voted on. So we're just going to print out that response. So if we see that response, it means everything works successfully. So on the button click, we take the token, we take the project, or we take the vote, we take the project, and then we send this request here. So let's see if it's all working. So if I go ahead and refresh this, let's open up our console. Looks like something went wrong here. So unexpected token here, line 58. Let's see what's going on here. So it looks like I forgot to add in headers here. So this is supposed to be headers like that. So sorry about that. So we add a colon here. So we do the method and then we have all the headers. So there we go. That fixes the indentation. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. So if I refresh this, now if I vote, we get back another error. So let's see what's going on here. I just realized what we forgot. We forgot the body. So we forgot to actually send the data. So after our headers, sorry about these mistakes, we're going to add in the comma there and we'll just do body. So we need to actually send that data. So the body here, this is going to be, this needs to be stringified actually. So we need to turn our data into a string. So we're just going to do JSON. So JSON.stringify. And inside of stringify, we're going to pass in our object here. So that's going to be the equivalent of sending this body data here. So we're creating this right here. So we'll go ahead and do JSON.stringify, and we're just going to do value, and the value will be the actual vote. So we'll just do vote. So this data is going to be stringified, and then in the back end, it's going to be parsed and turned back into our Python dictionary, I believe is how it's going to access it. So we send the data, now we should get that response. So let's try that one more time. So if I refresh that, if I send it, there we go. We get that success response and the vote was complete. So I can downvote. If I look at the response here, vote ratio is 0. So I downvoted it, vote total is 1. If I upvote, I get that response. Now the vote ratio is 100%. The vote total is 1. So that's it for sending the post request. We're sending the token. What I want to do here really quick is just clean this up. So make sure that whenever we vote, we see the changes be reflected here. And then we'll move on to making sure that we don't have to get this token here hard coded. So we're going to fix this here in a second. So let's fix a few things up. So we'll go down here and let's take this get projects function, and anytime a vote is complete, let's go ahead and load in more projects. So we're going to actually call the API and load in more projects. Now there's still going to be an issue with this and we'll fix that in a second. So I just refresh that. If I vote, more projects were loaded, and you notice that if I scroll down, we just added a bunch more projects. So we just appended a bunch of projects to this list. So if I vote again, you're going to notice this shrink right here. So we're just loading in a bunch of projects. So if I keep scrolling, it just goes forever. And that's because we are getting more projects, but we're not clearing our current projects list here. So we just keep adding projects to this and that's it. So in this case, I'm going to do I guess a hacky fix here. So on each iteration before we load the projects here, we're going to take this projects wrapper and we're going to clear it. So we're just going to do projects wrapper.inner HTML, and this is going to be set to an empty string. So we're going to clear it, and then we're going to load in new projects. So let's test that. So I can refresh it. So if I go ahead and downvote it, now you're going to notice that changed. Why did that change? Well, we downvoted that project. So that should appear somewhere down here. So if I go down here and upvote this project, we're going to see 9 somewhere up here now. So 9 is up here. So if I go to Yoga Vibe here, it's at 98%. Let's go ahead and downvote it. Yoga Vibe is now going to be moved down. So remember, we're ordering these by the actual vote. So now Yoga Vibe is at 0%. If I upvote it, it's at 100%. So that's all we did here. Now, the last thing I want to do here is get you prepped for the next video. So we're going to build in a login form, and we want to actually, when we log in, take that token and store it in local storage. So just like when we log in, where if we go to application, where Django by default creates our cookies here, we're going to use local storage. There's different ways of doing this. We could store in cookies. We can do local storage, HTTP only cookies. I'm going to leave this up to you. But for now, what I'm going to do here is actually take that token that we currently have. So we're going to take this token, we're going to put that in our cookies, and then I'm going to replicate how we would pass in this token on each request. So we're going to copy the cookie here, not the string. So I'm going to remove that. So leave this like this for now. Let's go ahead and go into local storage. So inside of application, storage, local storage, let's find our website. At this point, it's just a file path. And let's just add in a new key. So double click that and then add in token and paste in the token right here. So now if I go to token, we can see that. So the token is now inside of our local storage. So if I refresh it, it stays here until we clear it. Now to actually get this token, all we need to do is do token, and then we'll just do local storage. So we can actually access this through JavaScript, and then we'll do get item like that. So we're going into local storage and we're getting an item, and we're just going to get that token. So that needs to be in a string. So we'll just do token like that. And let's just console this out here. So we'll just do console.log, and let's just console out the token. So we'll just do token here, pass that in, and there we go. So now on each request, we're going into local storage, we're getting that token, and we're passing that in on this request here. So if I go ahead and refresh that, we're still getting this data and we can still vote on it. So if I go into my console, we can see that when the page loads, when I actually make this request, we can see that token that was taken from local storage. Now, if I go ahead and go into application, if I delete this token and I refresh it and then try to vote again, we get back an error, or we should get back an error. So it gives us this error. In this case, it's not a success. I manually printed that out. That should be changed. And we're getting blocked. So if you notice, the vote's not changing and we're not refreshing that data. That's happening because this token right here is not being passed in, and it's saying we need a token. So let's handle this in the front end to where we're not having to manually go in here and set this token. That's going to happen on the login form.